So the first thing that we'll go through today will be browse fetch local storage, which I think will be quite useful for assignment 2. I think there might be a component where you're using local storage. Okay, so let's go through this problem. We've got a JSON file stored at this URL. Oh, pretty simple. It's really just an object, JSON with keys, values. We've got Santa with 12 reindeers. Primary is Rudolph, very cute. Okay, so what we need to do is write a basic web page in store.html that fetches that data from this resource, decodes the JSON, and then displays it in a well-organized flex element / container on the page. You are not allowed to add any static HTML or CSS to the web page as part of this activity. You must generate everything on the page dynamically via JavaScript and DOM manipulation. All right, okay, let's get straight into it. So store.html is currently empty. So what I'm going to do is just rip this from another exercise. It's not going to be promises. This is going to be local storage, I guess. All right, cool. And I think my script, I called this script.js. So I think originally when you clone, this, it's only got store.html. I just created a new file called script.js within it. Yep, you can see that there. And I'm just importing it here in the body. Yeah, and you can see we've got no HTML in the body. We're going to build this entirely from the DOM. So I guess in the real world, you don't really want to build stuff entirely from the DOM. You might have things like a little skeleton, I guess. So if we have like a container, we give it class equals container. And then you can see inside here, we have one column for the key values and one column for the values, I guess, of the JSON. So you would end up with having div class equals, call this maybe col, ID, that's key, column. And then we would have another column, ID equals, let's call this like val. That's not that. Right. And we could probably style this as, we could have CSS, we could style this as a flexbox column. This one also is a flexbox column. And that would be good. Except in this, they've obviously told us we're not allowed to add static HTML or CSS to the web page, and we have to do this entirely from JavaScript. So that will just be a little bit of extra work on the JavaScript, but we're essentially aiming to sort of recreate this. And then when we add things like the name, it will end up like div a class equals, actually you wouldn't need a class, it would just be a div, and you'd have like name. Another div, reindeers. Another div, primary. And then you would have the same in the other column. So that's sort of essentially what we're trying to recreate using our JavaScript. All right, so let's clear that then, because we know sort of what we're aiming for. Actually, let's leave this here. We'll pretend it'll go away, but let's leave this here just as like a reference so we know what we're aiming for. Okay. So, all right, the first thing we want to be able to do is fetching the data from this resource. Okay. So let's do All right, let's do this. So let's give it a URL. So actually, we looked into this a bit earlier. So this URL actually doesn't really work. It's got a cross-origin blocking thing that stops React apps from being able to access it. So this is actually the bad URL that we're going to be using later for demonstrating when there's an error accessing the URL. So Sean, one of the other tutors, just uploaded the data onto a gist on GitHub and then hosted it that way. So we can use that as like our actual URL. Right, and then, okay, so let's do the fetch part. If we remember how to fetch data, we just use the fetch function. We give it an input, so where we want to request from, URL, and then what fetch does is returns a promise that we can then feed to .then. Also, just a quick note. Oh, we've had a lot more participants now. How does everyone feel about promises? You can do like the little like thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, yeah. So yeah, really quick refresher. So a promise is essentially like, it returns a thing where it's like, I know the response, it hasn't come yet, because it takes a little bit of time to fetch stuff, right? To connect to the internet and then download it back. So what it does, fetch returns a promise, and then the promise knows when it actually evaluates. So the .then is like, okay, we fetched the URL and the URL has, and the data has actually come back. And then we can catch it with the .then. So after the URL is fetched, what we get is actually, why don't we do response, and then let's just inspect what we get. And then I will start up my server. Oh, okay, that's from where we added that before. Okay, cool. So our console is telling us this is what we printed out. Our response. So it's got quite a bit of information, but it's not very readable. It's not really exactly what this is, right? So what we need to do to confirm, to convert this into something we can read, I think we need to do response dot. You can notice that here there's a dot to like JSON function that we can apply. So we're going to turn this into JSON. Did that do anything? Oh, I forgot to console.log it. Oh, that's a pending promise. And it's been fulfilled. And it's an object. Okay, here we go. We get the result. And that is, yep, that's what we want. Okay, so once that resolves, then we know we've got the data. Console.log the data like this. Yep, okay, now that looks like what we need. We've got, yeah, essentially what's right here. Cool. So then instead of obviously console.logging, we want to display it up here. So let's jump straight into reconstructing this. So it'll be easiest to just put things into a container and give it like sort of like and be able to style it. So let's create const container equals document dot, you can create element, we can create a div element, right? And this div element, we probably want to apply some styling to it, so we can do, we can make this a flex box. So in order to change styles, change the CSS of a element in JavaScript, we can just do container.style, and then we can make its display equal to flex. And then we can also, I want to increase the font a little bit. So font size, I'll make it. All right. And right now the container isn't really doing anything. It's just being created. We actually need to add it to like the HTML. So I want to go body. We also have to select the, I think you can actually just go document dot body. Yeah. Okay. Dot add child, append child. Cool. All right. And then we can see the inside body. We've got this one. We've got this container. And then we've also got this container that's been added. That's not really doing anything yet because there's nothing inside. So now we're going to populate it with the data. So I'm going to actually make a new function that's just called display data. And we'll feed it the data. Okay. And so what we want to do is every time we get new data, we want to refresh it. So we want to clear what's in the container. So we want to go container dot, I think it's inner, okay, inner HTML. You can set it to empty. So that just clears everything. I guess I can demonstrate it. Oh, you'll see it working. Okay, so container.inner HTML, set it to empty, just clears all the HTML inside. So if we were to apply it to this one, it would have just cleared these two out. Okay. I might comment as I go. So reset display. And then we want to also construct the two columns. Right. So we can do a const the key column. Keys call. And that can just be another div. Right. And the styling we want to apply to it. So we want to display things in a column. So we'll give it a container, keys call dot style dot display. We'll make that equal flex. We'll give it a style. We'll give it a flex direction of column. And is there anything else that we need to add to it? I don't think so. And then we want to append it to this container. So container dot append child. Okay. And then we essentially basically do the exact same thing to the values column. All right, nice. What I might do is just show you what that looks like. Display data. All right, cool. So we see this is the bit that we've created. And now we've got like a div and then 2 divs inside of it. So that's good. And then even when we reload, that's still there. Cool. Okay. And now the next thing is just to populate the 2 columns. So add data to the 2 columns. Okay. So we need to just iterate over this JSON. It's essentially an object right now. So what we can do is so we have this handy function called object.entries, which allows us to iterate over all of these. So we do const, I think this eval of object.entries of data. And yeah, because this ends up returning like a list of lists. So you end up having like a list of items and then like, a list of lists. Each list contains its first element is like the key value, so that's name. The second element is like Santa. All right, and then after that, we want to, okay, so for each key value, essentially what we want to do is put it inside a div, and then we want to insert it inside this column. So the way we do this, it looks like we want to create a new div. So key div equals document.create element. And then we want to, oh, actually, okay. So then we add the text because every element also has something called text content. And then we can set that to key. And then we just want to append that to the keys column. And child key div. And then very similar thing for value, val div equals div val div. We want to set its text content to val. And then the values column dot append child the val div. All right, let's see how that goes. Oh, nice. Yep. So we've populated that column with our 3 divs with all the key values, and this column has all the values. And then, yeah, that's what we wanted. Okay, so now it's safe to, so we've essentially sort of recreated this. So let's delete that then, because we don't need it anymore. One thing, that probably needs a bit of a margin. I'll add that. Maybe question to the audience. How would I create a little bit of space between the first column and the second column? What would I need to change? Space between the divs using .style. Yeah, really good. Okay, I can probably add that to the first column. So what I'll do is keys col.style. I'll give it like a margin, right? I don't know, 15px maybe. Yeah, seems like a good amount of space, maybe 20px. Yeah, thanks, Daryl. Cool, so that looks a little bit better. All right, I think that's the first part done then. Yeah, so we've been able to fetch some data and we've been able to generate the page dynamically. Oh, that needs way more space, hang on. we'll give it 40px. Yeah, all right. Okay, and now, okay, we're on to the local storage part. So before it displays in the container, it should store a copy of the data in local storage. Okay, so essentially, yep, when the data comes in, before we display, we want to add it to local storage. Okay, so in order to add to local storage, let's actually look this up so we can see the documentation. Okay, so the local storage has some handy methods that we can use. The main important ones, I guess, for us are set item and get item. So the way that things are stored in local storage is we give it we basically can set and get by a key, similar to the way that I guess that the keys and values work in JSON objects as well. And the key is important because it allows us to get the same thing, because then you can store multiple things in local storage and then you can get the one that you need. Okay, so let's do local storage dot set item. And we'll just call this, I guess this package data, this is package.json. And we'll just give it data. See what happens there. There. Oh, okay. So now what I do is I've installed a Chrome extension that allows me to look at my local storage. So that's local storage manager. And it looks like, okay, so I've stored package data and the value is just an object. Okay, I'm really mildly worried because I'm not sure it actually recognizes objects. So let's just see. Okay, let's see what happens after I do dot then. Nothing gets returned, but all I want to do, this is just a test. I want to do local storage dot get item data, and I'm just going to console.log it to see what gets returned. Okay, yeah, so it's just a vague object. It doesn't actually know what it is, I don't think. Let's see if I can also like query it. Like if I go name, I don't think it'll know what to do. Yeah, it's undefined. Okay, so yeah, in local storage, you can't just store JavaScript objects. What you'll need to do is actually convert it to JSON in order to store it. So what we can do is the JSON.stringify method will allow us to do that. That's still undefined. Let's see what that does. Oh, okay, that's better. Yep. Cool. Wait, if I do name now, will it not work? Okay. Yep. All right. And that's retrieving something that seems, well, it looks exactly like what we got originally from here. Right. Okay. Yep. All right. Now we've successfully added to local storage. Okay. So now what we want to do is if there's an error accessing the URL or there's an error decoding the information at that URL, we want the web page to display a cached values and provide the user with a simple message informing that this data is not live. Okay. In order to detect an error, that's pretty simple. We can see that we got .then response equals responsive JSON. .then we do all this. We also have a statement called .catch, And what that's doing is it's going to essentially catch any errors that come from either of these two, or either of these, any of these bits of code. So it's usually whenever you have dot then, I'd recommend just like out of abundance of caution, always having a dot catch at the end, even if it's just like console.log error, just so you know when something's going wrong with your fetching, because sometimes it's a little bit not so obvious. So yeah, obviously no errors here, but if we feed it the bad URL, okay, yeah, you can see I'm printing the error. The error is that failed to fetch, essentially. And because we failed to fetch, we don't actually end up calling display data, right? Because yeah, this only runs if these succeed. So it's failed up here, so it's gone straight to the dot catch here. Cool. And yeah, so we've just got an error. All right. Okay, so in the case of the error, what do we want to do? We want to retrieve the values stored in the local storage and display that instead. Nice. Okay, so we do const cached data. And remember, local storage also has a method called get item. And we give it the key that we used to set it, which was package data. And okay, just again, out of caution, what we want to just quickly do is check that cache data has actually been found. Because in the case that there was nothing retrieved in the first place, what we want to do is, I think cache data will be like none or something. So if not cache data, we maybe want to just like console.log no cache data. And then we want to just return so we don't do the next thing. But then we would want to just display data with the cache data. And we also want to display the message, this data is not live. Okay. Might quickly write a little function that's like const display message. So if we're given a message, what we want to do to display it, we just want to go, want to get a new message div. Document dot create element div. We want to give, we want to set its text content to message. And then we want to append it to the container. So this way it should be able to append it to whatever's at the top of the container. So it should be at the bottom there. So we want to display the message data is not live. Right. Oh god. Something odd has happened. Reload. What's happened here? 0, 1, 2, 3. Is there something weird that happened in local storage? Looks fine. What's this? Ah. Oh, okay. Does anyone actually have an idea of why it looks like this. Why we essentially got so all the columns seem to be like these numbers. The key columns seem to be these numbers, and the values columns seem to be, this is just like essentially the JSON, this JSON stored, but it's just one character at a time. Yeah, yeah, you're very much on the right track. Yeah, so it does have to do with the formatting. I think my bad, I did not explain exactly what was happening as it got stored in local storage. So JSON.stringify, what it was doing was it was getting the data JSON object and converting it to a string and storing it as a string. So this here, it's stored as a string. When I retrieved it, it just got a string back, right? And so that's what it's printing out and displaying. So in fact, I cannot just give it cache data because that's just a string. So we want to do, I think JSON.parse will convert you from a string to a normal JSON thing. Amazing. This looks correct now. And then this data is not live appears on the right, which is not what I want. Maybe I can just append to, because, oh yeah, containers a flex box, which is like a row. So that's why it looks like that. So instead of appending it to container, I'll just append it to the body. Which makes more sense anyway, it shouldn't be in the container. All right, cool. Yeah, and that's down here. This data is not live. All right, okay, yes. So yeah, just to repeat again, when you're storing in local storage, you're storing strings. I think it might be able to store numbers as well. And then so you just have to remember that when you're retrieving out of local storage, you have to turn it back into a JSON object. All right. Okay, yeah, so bad URL. Let's also see what happens when there's no cache data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete it here. So there's no local storage data. Let's reload. Cool. Yeah, it's empty and it just prints out no cache data because you can see we end up reaching this place. Cool. And now, okay, let's feed in the actual better URL now to see if it still works. Yes, it still works. Excellent. All right. Okay, now the last thing is have the page say loading, please wait, while we're waiting for the asynchronous fetch decode calls to complete. Once the page is ready to render, you want to display the page as normal and then remove the loading, please wait assets. Okay. All right. Okay, so the way that we can do this is, so since display data will always like clear the containers in a HTML, might be a good idea to put the loading please wait just inside container. And we can just put this at the start. So container.text content equals loading, please wait. That should work. And let me just reload. Okay, I guess the problem is that it's loading so quickly that we can't tell if it's working. So what I'm going to do is, okay, let's, I guess, like mock sort of something taking a while. Yeah, let's put this to sleep. So I'm going to make this one asleep. So we'll set timeout. Send it to sleep for 2 milliseconds, I guess. Oh yeah, let's go. Yay, that seems to work. Nice. And let's check that that still works with the bad URL. Oh yeah, in that case, it's literally immediate because I put it here. Yeah, because I guess when it fails, it never gets to here, so it's never sleeping. Okay, so you can see, yeah, the yeah, it's loading. That does that. But that's just for demonstration purposes. We don't actually want to put in a sleep for no reason. Yeah, now we can just trust that it works. There's also a thing that I want to try on the network tab. There's like throttling, so you can like demo what it's like under slow 3G. Okay, and then you can see it still does the, yeah, you can sort of see this loading. Please wait for a bit. Yeah, okay. And then there was a flash as well. All right. Okay, yeah, so that's all. What we did was we demonstrated just constructing divs and styling straight from the JavaScript. And you can see, yeah, it's really quite powerful. There's nothing you can do in HTML, I think, that you can't do just from JavaScript. And then we also showed the fetching, we showed catching errors, and also storing things in local storage, and the importance of keeping the data types correct. All right, any questions about that? Happy to go back at any time if you guys have any questions about what we just did there. But everything's all good for now. We can go to this one, which is async nested promises. So yeah, this is just, Darren Chan says, what's the difference between create text node and text content? That's a really good question. I've used both before. I've never noticed a difference. So let's look this up. Create text node versus text content. Maybe for demonstration purposes, I'll just do both to show you that it like behaves the same, I guess, in this case. So yeah, so let's do for the val divs, what we can do is, actually, yeah, let's have a look. So before we Google, so yeah, inside these divs, what we've done is text content. But for the val divs, so that's the right-hand side, let's use create text node instead. So val div dot append child a document dot create text node, and then feed in the value. Right. Okay, and let's compare if there's any differences. It really looks identical, doesn't it? Yeah. So let's see what Google says, what Stack Overflow says. Okay, so Stack Overflow is telling us the fundamental difference is create text node is a method and works just as the name says, creates an element that you must do something with. So it's useful if you want to have a new element and place it somewhere. Okay. Whereas text content is like a property of an existing element, I guess. So it's only useful when you want to change the content of an already existing element. Right. That says text content seems easy to use. Yeah, it's just less typing. So yeah, I think, yeah, there's no way that you can like mess this up. Yeah, good question though.